What's up? Welcome in to the season finale preview episode. Johns, I was walking into Alice Hall yesterday. 2 days in a row for me, by the way. It's a big moment. It's a big
Good to
moment.
see you again live.
You weren't the only one who called me out for that, by the way.
Keep you in your toes.
There's a certain tight end who plays for the Bears who saw me 2 days in a row and was like, "What are you doing here?"
What the F, man? What are you doing?
Yeah.
We don't have an 85 today.
But I was walking in and I was like, man, the season, as long as a season as this is felt at many times, considering everything that's happened, you kind of sit back and you're like, man, it feels like I was just walking in a training camp like 2 days ago.
It flies by.
Same parking lot. It always finds a way to fly by, and here we are in January, our first episode of 2025. Happy New Year, everyone. We got Bears-Packers to close it out. What could go wrong, Johnsy?
Well, a lot of things have already gone wrong this season, so I don't know what can go wrong in this game. Stuff definitely will, but at this point, Adam, it is just what it is. This game lacks the typical rivalry juice. The energy doesn't feel the same. Packers are on to the postseason, playing for bigger things. The Bears have their next head coach search looming in a matter of days.
Yeah. And because of that, we are going to reverse order a little bit on our normal preview show. We usually do 3 big questions. We've increased those to 5 big questions, which our listeners came up with this week, right?
Correct.
So, and because those are more bigger picture questions, which we know that you guys want to hear more about at this point, we're going to start with those this week. Then we got our friend Mike Heller, who's been joining this podcast basically since it started during Bears-Packers weeks when we don't talk to Matt Schneidman. We usually talk to Mike Heller. And so he's going to join us a little bit later on in the show. Then we'll do our normal over-unders and pick the game and games. A couple other good ones, including the big showdown between the Lions and Vikings on Sunday night. So got all that coming your way. Johns, before we get into the big questions, I wanted to just bring up an observation from being at Hallis Hall yesterday. And I'm not going to lie to you. Like at first I was like kind of actually significantly bothered by it. And then I sort of slept on it and I'm like, all right, maybe I'll cool off a little bit. But that locker room yesterday,
I knew you were going to say this.
It's
been like that for weeks.
I know, but it's like, is this a 12-4 team or is it a 4-12 team? Because it seems like it's a 12-4 team. And I was just standing in there, and I was in there early, right when it opened yesterday, and like, there's music blaring. There's like people dancing. I'm not gonna lie.
Like, that's right there as you walk in.
Yeah, and what also struck me was Ian Cunningham was in there for a little bit.
Ooh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, he was in there basically, from what I saw, was in there to congratulate Jalen Johnson on making Pro Bowl, which is cool. But that was while the music was blaring. And I wasn't looking at him for him to be like, cut that out and like jump. That's not really his role as the assistant GM. That's on the coaching staff to kind of, and the coaches aren't really in the locker room. So to be honest, it's really on the players to police the locker room. So it's not like I'm expecting Ian Cunningham to do anything about it, but I was watching him to be like, to see if he noticed, to see if it like, and I didn't necessarily get that reaction. I don't necessarily care, but the whole thing just was like odd to me. And then I guess my point where I'm saying I cooled off a little bit is the more I thought about it, I just think it's a lost cause for this season. You know what I mean? Like I just any policing that would have gone on should have happened like 8 weeks ago. Like what is anybody going to do at this point? I think we know what the season has become, but it doesn't mean it's right. It was really in the context of Mike Vrabel, who we're about to talk about, and I had a long conversation with Kevin Byard the other day about Mike Vrabel. That was on the CHGO YouTube page. I was thinking about that while I was witnessing what I was witnessing. Because I'm like, this shit wouldn't fly in most situations like this.
I've thought about it a lot too. Mark Harmon, when he's at Hallis Hall. I think he brings it up every single time. I've come to this conclusion where it's a down and out of a team, and I've covered a lot of locker rooms before, and I think sometimes it could be misleading, just the vibe and energy. Like maybe practices were really intense. Some of these players that we're talking about seeing being loose, they're some of the younger players, so their energy's different. Like there's not that like that sense of, I don't know, finality, because they know they're going to play more football, and we don't see a lot of the veterans in the locker room a lot. Right? It's not like it's the veterans in there playing basketball or playing cards in the corner or whatever, like we've seen before in other locker rooms. So I don't want to like overrate the vibe. I think when I compare it to like post-game locker room, like the last post-game locker room after the Seahawks lost, that felt somber. That felt sad. Like we just lost the football game 6-3. There's nothing left to say. There aren't any good things to talk about. Sure, the defense bounced back, but we're done. Like this is it. And I think it's been a long, slow march to this since the firing of Matt Eberflus. I really think that. I think when your head coach is fired during the season, this is what you get. This is the vibe. This is the energy. This is the juice. This is, or lack thereof. This is just what it becomes after that happens. And I don't think there's any escaping that. To be honest, no matter like who comes in or what is said, what Thomas Brown tries to say, how well Caleb Williams tends to play, it's just it.
Yeah. No, I get all that, and that's kind of where I sort of settled down on the whole thing. I do wonder though, like the reason why I brought up Ian Cunningham being in there, if he is around next season, which isn't a for sure thing. Just if that's taken note of, right? Like that scene, because they don't spend a lot of time in there. And later, I'll say that later in that media session, Ted Cruz walked through there too, and he's right up there with Kevin Warren.
Ted Cruz cuts through that locker room a lot.
Yeah, and his job's a little bit different. You would expect him to be in there a little bit more, but same thing. I'm wondering. I'm like, does this resonate? Is this something that matters, or is it just being shrugged off? Because I don't know. If I was running the team, I would take note of that. And to be honest, there were some veterans that were a part of that yesterday. It wasn't just the young guys. So anyway, I just thought it was a notable thing to bring up in the context of how the season has gone, and what was for me my last locker room session before the last game. We'll see how exit interview day goes on Monday, but
it's always an awkward day.
Yeah, it's always. I
mean, you got very boxes there. Guys are throwing stuff away. Some guys are leaving well before others.
Yeah. Some might even have their lockers cleaned out before they head to Green Bay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's happened before.
100%. So we'll see how that all plays out next week. But before we get there, look at this. 5 big questions.
5 big questions. This one's from Pat. Why haven't they interviewed Mike Vrabel yet? Is that loud enough? Was that serious enough? Dude, seems like they made the move to fire Flus early and have done nothing to take advantage of their head start. With his contract ending a few days ago, I'm finding myself frustrated early that they haven't started the process yet.
So I worked pretty late there at Hallis yesterday. And sometimes when you do that, you have some random people that you don't normally see wander through the media room. And at one point, one of our, longtime security guys, Tony, comes through there with 2 people. And I am telling you, one of these 2 people was Mike Vrabel's doppelganger. I looked at him 3 times and I was like, holy crap, I'm about to break a story here. Vrabel's in the building today. And then I'm like, I'm not even kidding. I looked at him 3 times and I don't know if it's like I wanted him to be Vrabel and I was like convincing myself. And then I'm like, wait a minute, that's not Vrabel. But I seriously
was like 6'6".
I had like a moment. Well, that's what gave it away, actually, that he was
Mike Vrabel's a big dude.
Mike Vrabel's a big dude, and this guy was kind of big, but he wasn't tall. He wasn't tall enough to be Vrabel. And I was sitting down in my cubicle. So once I kind of sized him up a little bit better. I'm like, okay, calm down, Hoge. You're okay. Nothing's happening here. And then I just laughed because I thought it was hilarious. Anyway, yeah, Vrabel's in New Jersey today, apparently, interviewing with the JETS Jets.
They've already interviewed Ron Rivera for their head coaching opening, and they also interviewed Louis Riddick for their GM opening. So they're getting a head start on things. Like I understand the impatience, but are you really surprised the McCaskies haven't started this process yet before the season has ended?
No.
I didn't expect them to interview anybody until at the earliest Tuesday. So it is what it is.
It is what it is. Did you see the amazing story that came out today that we you go in the context with our conversation with Diana Rossini earlier in the week, which I encourage you to check out if you missed that episode. But Zach Rosenblatt,
it came out today. Good. I gotta check that out.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't seen it yet?
No.
Oh yeah. I woke up early. I was reading this thing at like 6 a.m. Really good stuff. I encourage everybody to check it out. Theathletic.com/Hoge Jahns if you're not subscribed. But Zach Rosenblatt, who covers the Jets, actually spent a lot of his season working on the story with Mike Vrabel in Cleveland. So there's bits and pieces that are in Nashville where Vrabel still calls home, Cleveland where he's been working this season, and then there's even a visit to New York City at one point. It's super interesting. It gives you a lot of context to what went wrong in Tennessee, what he's been doing in Cleveland, which is fascinating. Very specific stuff too, like who he's been working with, his relationship with DeJuan Jones, offensive tackle at Ohio State, who's in his second year, that they really bonded, and Jones actually asked him to start traveling to the games because originally his job didn't include going to the road games, and so he's like, yeah, and he started going to the game. It's really good stuff, and it also gives you an idea. It addresses head on this idea that Vrabel, I think, realized doing interviews last year after he got fired, that there is this stigma on him that he is hard to work with, that between the front office. And I think that there's some self-realization there that he's not going to change who he is, but he needs to find the right situation. And he talks specifically about ownership. And I would put that in question with both the Jets job and the Bears job, quite frankly, when it comes to ownership. And I keep coming back to a guy named Tom Brady, who is now a very significant owner with the Raiders. If they open up that job, to me, that would make a lot of sense for Vrabel, that spot, that location.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because the way I'm starting to read the Vrabel situation is just other teams just might be more serious about hiring him when compared to the Chicago Bears. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
Like other teams are going to be all in on Mike Vrabel, while the Bears want to have second or third interviews and they want to keep doing their research on Mike Vrabel. Where other teams are going to be like, he's the best head coach available. He's our guy. It's Vrabel or nothing. I don't think the Bears are going to have that mindset, sadly.
Yeah, isn't that a problem, though?
It's a problem, Adam. It's a problem.
Okay. Just want to make sure. The Bears are going to do things the Bears way. I'm with you on this question that it would have made sense to start getting ahead. You know, we also learned in that story, by the way, though, that Vrabel he spent the holiday, like this past week. He was, let me back up a little bit. His contract, the Browns let him out of his contract basically this last week to get his head start on the interviews. But before he did that, he spent the new year at his house in Park City, Utah, which is a cool place to have a house, by the way, with his family and stuff, like sort of chilling out, vacationing, getting ready for this. So that process for him starts today. So it sounds like the first time the Bears even really could have talked to Vrabel would have been today. The Jets got first dibs for whatever reason, maybe because they were the first job to open up. And we'll see how quickly the Bears talk to. I would expect this to happen
next week.
Early next week, right after the season. And so we'll see how quickly the Bears move.
Yeah. This is why I like number 2. This question feeds off the Vrabel question really well. This is from Mike. What are the chances the Bears go with another off-the-wall type head coaching hire, Trestman, Eberflus, etc., as opposed to a clear top option? So let's set the stage this way. I think the 2 clear top options are, if you're looking for an offensive-minded head coach, it's Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator. And if you're looking for the experienced leader of men with a good track record, that's Mike Vrabel. Those are your clear top options. I'm not surprised. Like, the Jets are going to interview other candidates, but what do you think is going to happen? Like, I think this is a real conversation about the Bears because this is what they do.
Yeah. We joked around the other day, right, about Josh McCown. I think that would be like kind of what I would consider off the wall a little bit. I would put Brian Flores in the conversation of more of a obvious top option. Your guy Todd Monken that you brought up, though. Sorry, I put that a little bit more in the off the wall category. Yeah. What we're talking about here is more like the word reach, like a little bit of a reach, right?
Like Mark Trestman was an amazing reach at a time when you had Bruce Arians, the reigning coach of the year.
It'll never make sense. No matter how many times we say it, it won't ever make sense. Ever. But so is Eberflus. Because it wasn't an incredibly inspired list of finalists, but Jim Caldwell, even Jim Caldwell had a track record of success with a terrible organization with the Detroit Lions. A well-respected offensive mind who worked with Peyton Manning, who won a Super Bowl. Like, it's and they went Matt Eberflus. And that's without me even mentioning Dan Quinn, who was the more of the obvious choice at the time. But now he's getting his second opportunity. What are the chances? I do sense some I look, when this goes for any sport really, when you fire a coach, you usually zag away from that. So, and we've seen that here with the Bears too. I mean, they went from Trestman to John Fox to Matt Nagy to Matt Eberflus. So you just follow the pattern, and you think they're going to go offense. But it is the Bears, so I'll say 20% chance. But I do think with Kevin Warren there, and
I would say higher still.
Yeah.
Oh, is see, like Brian Flores doesn't really fit that. Does Aaron Glenn? You're talking about like, okay, yeah, there is a percentage here, maybe 20-25%. There is that possibility it's going to happen because I think the Bears are going to have some head coach interviews of people that are not on our lists, on the popular list. But
let me put it this way, Johns. I think they are going to make a run at Ben Johnson, and I think they are also going to be very interested in Vrabel. My fear is Vrabel's going to go elsewhere, and Ben Johnson is just not going to be comfortable with the politics, the setup, and he's going to feel more comfortable with that Jacksonville job.
Yeah, did you see that report or that video clip going around about Jacksonville reporters?
That was a very interesting. I'll admit, I don't know who that guy is that was talking. There was it's a radio show in Jacksonville. I got the sense that I was watching. I watched it this morning, and there was a guy on the show who what he was saying was credible because he's apparently really close friends with Mark Brunell, who's the Lions quarterbacks coach, working under Ben Johnson. And he was basically saying that he was telling Brunell to make sure Ben Johnson takes the Jacksonville job where Brunell could come back to Jacksonville. Remember, where he had a lot of success as a player and be the quarterback's coach there. And Brunell apparently told him, assuming this guy was telling the story completely accurately and not embellishing anything, that, yeah, that's what Ben Johnson wants to do. I think there's enough there to take it seriously.
Yeah.
That I think the Jacksonville job is a very viable possibility for Ben Johnson. It doesn't mean the Bears can't swoop in there and change that, but there's certainly competition for Ben Johnson, and that's not a surprise by any means.
The way I've read all the national reports about Ben Johnson, what he's like interested in, what he's looking for in a team, like that has been straight messaging at the Chicago Bears before this process hasn't even begun.
1,000%.
Like there's no other way for me to interpret that. Is just in terms of figuring out your own power structure, figuring out why this is happening again, figuring out what you're actually going to say, what's going to be part of your pitch to Ben Johnson. That's how I read all the messaging that's out there nationally from the national reporters that they're putting out from the Ben Johnson side of things.
Here's how I read the situation right now. We'll see how it goes. It's January 3rd. I think Ben Johnson is both interested and comfortable with the Jacksonville job. I think he is interested, but not completely comfortable with the Bears job. And he's putting out messaging to beg them to make him feel comfortable about it, or at least give them the opportunity to sell him on why he should come to the Bears instead of Jacksonville. And I think it goes back to that same ownership stuff I was just referencing with Vrabel, too. All right, next question.
Number 3 from Brandon. If they go Brian Flores, is there any pending offensive coordinators you could see him paired with? I actually think Thomas Brown did a nice job when he's put up in the booth, but it's been worse since he got promoted. Could you see them retaining him and putting him back up for some continuity with Caleb?
So, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm not going to guess at this right now. I don't know. I have a name with Vrabel, though. Don't be shocked if wherever Vrabel goes, Tommy Rees is his OC. Tommy Rees is in Cleveland right now. He made the jump from college to the NFL. Tommy Rees, the former Notre Dame
Lake
quarterback.
Forest native.
Yeah.
Tommy Rees.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Rees is still very local. And Tommy worked with Northwestern for, I think it was 1 season, maybe 2, while I was doing sidelines there. Well respected mine, but it's been mostly in the college game till jumping up to the NFL. So that doesn't answer your question, though. I don't know off the top of my head what Flores might do. Maybe that's where Josh McCown ends up in Chicago. That could be a natural thing. We'll see. But the Thomas Brown thing, I think there's a world in which he could be retained under a defensive coach, whether that's Flores or somebody else. I floated this by somebody in the building the other day, though, and they were quick to point out the idea of retaining Thomas Brown for continuity's sake is a little flawed. Because if Thomas Brown is still the OC next year, the offense is still going to be different.
Yes,
and I don't know how
he's installing his own offense, not Shane Waldron's offense.
I don't know how to be more clear about this. So I'm going to try to be as blunt as possible. I don't think Thomas Brown really likes the offense he's running right now. I think he's handled it in press conferences very, very well, but this is not his system. He has tried hard to install what he can in the middle of a season, but that's not easy to do. And so the point is, will there be elements that are similar? Yes. Will there be some continuity? Maybe you retain more coaches, certain things they put in the season, some basic stuff behind the scheme. Will that lead to some continuity instead of basically tossing a playbook and putting it in a shredder and starting from scratch? Yes, there'll be a little bit. But this is not your retain a coordinator to keep everything the same type of move like you had when Matt Nagy kept Vic Fangio. It's very different.
I think if you're speaking of continuity, which I have long been a fan of, the elements that would be elements of continuity would be the messaging, would be the relationship, would be the experience together. But to your point, I could not agree more about the offensive philosophy. They are running elements of what Shane Waldron installed long ago. And they're trying to draw call it the Sean McVayness that was left in it out to use. And there's been some tweaks in terms of what they've been able to do in this kind of condensed period of time. Like you've seen it go from more, instead of so focused on plays, they're focusing on players. Like, hey, let's get DJ Moore the ball. He's good. He's a good player. Let's get him the ball and make good things happen. Like you've seen that kind of change from going from Waldron to Brown. But I don't know. To your point, Brandon, yes, I agree that there was something established that worked when Thomas Brown was in the booth and calling plays, and then things changed when he had to go down to the field. I think that's just a lot of what happens when you fire a head coach, though. Like that change has been almost something that's insurmountable for Thomas Brown. But yeah, the continuity part, there's different levels of that because I think Thomas Brown wants to run his own stuff. Number 4, this is from Brett. From what you've heard around the league, does Caleb make this job attractive, or will it be another Nagy situation where the coach is done with him after one season and pretty much lies during the interview to get the job?
That referring to how much Nagy liked Mitch Trubisky, which we kind of learned later wasn't
True at all.
Well,
he liked him, but he was ready to get rid of him by year 2 as well.
He liked him, but he didn't love him. Let's put it that way. Well, to be honest, both could be true. Because I do think Caleb has done enough this season to make this job attractive. Has he done enough? Let's just compare. Again, let's go back to the Chicago versus Jacksonville conversation. If you're Ben Johnson, who's had success with more of a veteran quarterback, Trevor Lawrence is sort of splitting Jared Goff, who's in his 9th season, and Caleb Williams, who would be going into his 2nd season next year, but is kind of more, he's that second contract quarterback who has had success, who clearly could use a better situation and more continuity of his own to maybe take the next step that Jared Goff has under Ben Johnson. I could totally understand why Ben Johnson would prefer that situation. So I do think Caleb makes his job attractive, but I could also see the second part of that question come true where a guy goes, yeah, I really like Caleb coming out, and then gets here and maybe things don't go great and the Bears end up down the road of, what happened under Trubisky. Now, let me be very clear about that, though. That is more of a Bears problem, and that is more of me speaking from the Bears, the lack of faith in the Bears getting this right, which they've consistently proven they can't do, than my feelings towards Caleb Williams. Because to me, you hire the right coach, Caleb is good enough that it's going to work. I still believe in him. I still think that's the case. But in the context of the question, there's still that possibility, I guess, that it exists.
I would argue it just happened under Matt Eberflus too, where Matt Eberflus is on record saying, I like Justin Fields' skill set. I talked to so many people. I like what I heard about him, that he could be a good young quarterback. It just lasts a little bit longer. Like, again, but maybe not. By the end of year 2, Eberflus was like, no, we're moving on to Caleb Williams. We got the first pick. Thank you for everything, Justin. Still love your skill set. Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Give me Caleb Williams. So I think even if it's an offensive-minded head coach or a defensive-minded head coach, this is something that's going to be a conversation point for a while because you're going to hear stories, you're going to read stories, you're going to have questions about their relationship, how they're building chemistry, how much time they're spending together. All of that stuff is going to be part of, the future storylines for the Chicago Bears.
Some coaches don't mind working with young quarterbacks. Others don't want to have anything to do with it.
I think this is a question for Brian Flores, too, and other defensive minds. Like, Brian Flores has to overcome what happened in Miami with Tua.
Yeah.
With Tua. And Tua has come out since then basically saying that he didn't like how Flores coached him.
Yeah.
And we saw him have success later with Mike McDaniel. Quickly, the offensive coordinators under Brian Flores, 2019, Chad O'Shea. 2020, Chan Gailey. 2021, George Godsey and Eric Studsville. I'm saying that wrong. So he changed. I mean, he had 4 offensive coordinators in 3 years.
Well, wasn't that another narrative that it was like hard to work with him?
Yeah.
That he just grinded those coaches away. I think I heard of some of that too. So same thing. How much has he learned from that experience? And yeah, that's a good, I mean, I put that right there in the, second biggest factor in my coaching, how to hire a head coach series. By the way, part 2 of that came out today too. So you guys got plenty of reading to do. You got to read the Zach Rosenblatt thing. You got to read part 2. This second part is more about experience and then some bonus factors at the end too. But in the first part, talked about hiring a staff. I do wonder, like with Brian Flores too, like who's begging to come work with him, given how that situation in Miami went. That's a completely fair question.
Number 5 from Cheating Croatian. Ryan Poles is 14-36 as GM. How can the Bears rationalize bringing him back? Will they be ready to move on from him if it means landing Ben Johnson?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Because I can see a world in which the McCaskies aren't ready to move on from him.
And that's the rationalization, isn't it? That's where the rational, yeah. It's where all the rationalizing, is that word?
Yeah.
It's where they're going to rationalize things. That's where it starts. The McCaskies are going to do it. They're the ones who are going to rationalize their decision into retaining Ryan Poles. They probably already have.
Well, and there's history behind that, Johns. Do you remember, this came up in a conversation I had yesterday. Remember, I'll never forget the 2020 Zoom conference call with George McCaskey and Ted Phillips. This one.
I think we haven't won enough under the leadership of George McCaskey, and that's what we're working on.
Have we gotten the quarterback situation completely right? No. Have we won enough games? No. Everything else is there.
But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because it's in context of this question, Johns. If you go back and actually even just read the transcript of that press conference, and I remember saying, I did a show on NBC that night and made the same exact point. That press conference, they laid out all the reasons for why Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy should be fired. And that was one of my biggest issues with it, was there actually were reasons to retain them. And they did such a horrible job of trying to defend their decision that they actually laid out the case for why they should be gone. And it really makes you concerned about how they process things that they're watching. The most glaring one that I think we can probably all remember was the Bears lost 6 games in a row that season. And George McCaskey brought that up as a reason why they should stay, because of how they handled the 6-game losing streak. Not that they lost 6 games to begin with, but how it was handled. So are we going to hear the same thing? We are so proud of how Ryan Poles kept things together during this 11-game losing streak this season. Please, God, do not let anybody say that when the season is over next week.
I think Mark Potash, our friend Potsy, puts it so eloquently. Nobody finds success in failure like the McCaskey family. I think he says the Chicago Bears, but nobody finds success in failures like the Chicago Bears.
To close out this question, in maybe a perhaps more relevant way of how it actually affects Ryan Poles, I give everybody a homework assignment. You can tweet these at me or tweet them at us at Hoge Jahns. Who on this team, on the roster, and I don't care if they're the last player on the roster, I don't care if they're on the practice squad, I don't care if they're at the top of the roster getting paid the most money. The question is, who on this team improved in 2024? Because that's one of my biggest problems with this entire season, Johns. Who got better? There are some guys that
I
stayed
don't know
the same.
I don't know if I have an answer. I would like to say that Caleb Williams just got better by playing, but no, I don't know. Like, look at Montez Sweat, your home run trade acquisition last year. Injuries and a complete dip in sack production.
Mm-hmm. Did Gervon Dexter get better? There were signs of that early, but I don't think when you zoom out and look at the whole season, he got better.
Darnell Wright?
I don't think Darnell Wright got better. I don't think Jaquan Brisker, certainly with the way his season went, those are different circumstances. But I'm talking about your young guys that you drafted, right? Specifically, those are the most important guys, the guys that Ryan Poles drafted. Did Kyler Gordon get better?
Okay. There's one. I'll get Kyler Gordon when he's.
I would argue Gordon's the same guy he's been.
Yeah, maybe
he's good.
He's a good player.
He's not. He's one of these classic guys that I sometimes get. Could he be an all-pro someday? Sure, but my point is, did he make it? Did he make a significant step to doing that in year 3? I don't know that that's the. I'll give you one because I said you can consider the whole roster. I think Matt Pryor got better. I think Matt Pryor went from a guy that's been a journeyman backup who actually found a role. And I'm not saying he's going to get signed by any team next year to go be a full-time starter, but I think he got better compared to where he's been. Now, you might give him the year in San Francisco as more credit for why that happened, but that's the point. That's really, and maybe that's more on the coaching staff than it is the front office, because once you draft the guys, the coaches are really the ones that are supposed to draft them, or develop them. But you're also the one that hired the coaching staff that you had to fire. And you made changes specifically on offense last year in January to that coaching staff that should have resulted in much better results. And instead, it's like everything's gone backwards. It's very disturbing.
So to answer the question, I think the Bears, and I think you agree with me, have already rationalized their decision into keeping Ryan Poles, or at least letting him jumpstart this process to get it going to the point where you're going to see him maybe interview Ben Johnson over Zoom sometime next week.
I think we haven't won enough under the leadership of George McCaskey, and that's what we're working on.
Well, they'll work on it again this weekend, where they have not won enough against the Green Bay Packers under the leadership of George McCaskey. They've lost 11 straight games to the Green Bay Packers. They've lost 10 games overall in this season, and the Packers are 10-point favorites. Mike Heller does a great job across the state of Wisconsin with his radio show. We've had him on this show really since we started this podcast a decade ago. The Mike Heller Show, 97.3 The Game in Milwaukee, Fox Sports 1070 The Game in Madison, and across the state of Wisconsin syndicated as well. Mike does a great job, and we welcome him to Hoge Jahns once again to talk Packers. All right, let's bring in our friend Mike Heller. You can follow him at Heller Sports. Always good having him on the show, even though he's wearing that green and gold logo today.
And he's got the helmet in the back. Double whammy.
To cover that up. We're okay, aren't we? Huh? Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Look, I think when you're at this point in whatever this rivalry has become, it's 11 straight wins for the Packers over the Bears. No one can really say anything. That's just what it is. But Mike, I'm trying to get a sense of the level of any excitement for this matchup, because I was just thinking about, despite the Packers' dominance in this series, it seems like most of the games still have some hype, still have some excitement, and I am sensing next to none in this one. Now, I get it in Chicago because no one really cares about the remaining game on the schedule. It's all about the coaching search. And no one's really excited about what could be an 11-game losing streak overall.
Yeah.
But with the Packers, what's the level of intrigue? They're in the playoffs. Seeding still matters a little, but I'm still sensing some apathy up there.
Yeah, I think it's the least juice in this matchup with the Bears in quite a long time. This is a very spoiled fan base for the last 30 years, talking about the Packers fan base for the most part. And what they're playing for simultaneous with Washington playing at Dallas and Green Bay home with Chicago is the potential to move from the number 7 seed to the number 6 seed. That's a big deal, but you only control half of that narrative anyway. And I think the fan base here is not all that jacked up about what this team has been, even though they're a 11-win team. It's the 5 losses. All 5 losses are 1 against Philadelphia, 2 against Detroit, and 2 against Minnesota. Leave the fan base uninspired about what the team can do after the regular season is done, because they don't have that. Usually we refer to signature wins in the college game, but the Packers fan base doesn't recognize that this team has a signature win, nor do they have a ton of confidence that they can actually do that.
Here in Chicago, we cover signature losses. There was that Hail Mary. There was the blocked field goal by the Packers.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I would remind Green Bay that look at your opponent on Sunday as a reminder. It could always be worse. What, like, beyond the loss of the signature wins, like, where else is there concern rooted? Is it Jordan Love? Where does it begin for you?
Yeah, I think it is Jordan Love. Now, I might not get a full consensus on that, but Jordan Love has not taken a significant step forward. Overall, Jordan Love ranks 12th in yards per game in the NFL. He's been, to me, just above a middle of the NFL quarterback. He's outside the top 20 in completion percentage. Although he's 8th in TDs, he's also thrown 11 interceptions, 25 and 11, which is a number that both numbers are going to be um, regressions from a year ago. He's 13 in quarterback rating. So he is not a top 10 quarterback. And I think a lot of Packers fans were thinking after the back half of last year, his last 9 games, where he goes 18 touchdowns, 1 interception, the enormously large game at Dallas in the first round of the playoffs. And then for 3+ quarters in Santa Clara, he was a very good quarterback against the Niners. 2 turnovers in the fourth quarter changed the narrative and the outcome of that game. So I think a lot of people look at Jordan Love and say he didn't make the step after, that end of his rookie starting season in the NFL. So I think that's part of it. The other part is defensively, they haven't been healthy in the secondary. Jair Alexander having a knee surgery earlier this week, a scope, likely ends his season. He hadn't played in 6 consecutive games either. The former All-Pro just didn't live up to that end of being available. So I think it really centers around Jordan Love and those 5 big games that they lost really all close. They lost by 5 against Philadelphia, 2 points each time to the Vikings, a 10-point and a 3-point loss to the Lions. So they're all close, essentially, but they didn't get home in any of them.
Yeah, I turned on the Monday night game a couple weeks ago, right before Christmas, and I think that was on ESPN, right? I think it was Aikman. The broadcast was like, they're like, Jordan Love is on the best run of his career. And I was like, he is? Like, I admittedly, I just think the way the schedules fall, and I've not watched the Packers as much as I probably normally do in most seasons, but I was just surprised to hear that. And then the more I kind of paid attention last week and watched that entire game against the Vikings, it's like that doesn't feel right. So is there a level of concern about the future, or is it more just disappointment that the jump wasn't quite there this season?
Well, they've got a pretty good chronicle of the last 2 quarterbacks, Favre and Rodgers, being first ballot Hall of Famers. And I think that last year, the second half, people thought, okay, Jordan Love's going to be the 3rd straight Hall of Famer because of his 18 touchdowns, 1 pick down the stretch a year ago. He hasn't thrown many picks in the last 6 games, Adam, but I also don't think he's been extraordinarily accurate, which isn't his forte anyway. You go from Rodgers, who was ridiculously accurate with his ball placement. I mean, it was just fantastic for an entire career, putting the ball exactly where it needed to be. Jordan Love's not that guy. So I don't think we've identified as a fan base who exactly he is. Now, there should be some patience for a guy, although it's his 5th year in the league, it's his 2nd year as a starter. And then I think people put numbers on it because he made the big salary, the big paycheck a year ago on that, essentially a max contract. And then I don't think he's been a guy that has carried the team. I put quarterbacks in a category. Can you win with him? And you can win with Jordan Love. Do you win because of him? We haven't seen much of that from him this year. And it'll be curious to see what steps he takes either now, and by now I mean talking about the playoffs, because they're going to be on the road regardless. If they don't win on Sunday, or if Washington wins at Dallas, Green Bay is going to be the 7th seed. So they'll play in Philadelphia. The Eagles have locked up the 2. And the Packers did play Philadelphia tough in that first game of the season all the way back in September in Sao Paulo. But if Jordan Love doesn't have a playoff run, and I'm talking about more than one game, then I think people are going to be very middle on the support as to the belief that he can be great.
Mike, I want to bring up, or at least have a conversation about the Packers and their head coaches. Like, here we are in Chicago. We're about to cover our 6th head coach under George McCaskey. That's 6 coaches since 2012.
Yeah.
Matt LaFleur, he's in his 6th season right
Yeah.
now. When did you know, given what you've covered before with other coaches in Green Bay, like that he was going to be another good coach for the Packers? Like, when did you see the signs that the Packers got this right? And I guess, why did they get this right again at head coach?
It's a really good question, because the first 3 years that Matt LaFleur is the head coach in Green Bay, they go 13, 13, and 13 and wins. A lot of the credit of that success was given to Aaron Rodgers. And I think that Matt LaFleur navigated very difficult waters. I think it's pretty well chronicled that, especially in the back half of his career, Aaron Rodgers has not been easy to coach. So I think Matt LaFleur stepping into that role, he had to dance around some things that Aaron Rodgers made difficult. And I think LaFleur got the blame in the NFC Championship game when they lost at Lambeau to Tampa and Tom Brady. I think LaFleur got the blame because he kicked a field goal late instead of going for it, and Rodgers didn't help him. But the navigation that LaFleur took with Aaron Rodgers, to me, was really impressive. And then to navigate that transition into Jordan Love, equally as impressive. And I think one of the cool things, one of the really great things about Matt LaFleur this year is you saw his offense really take its shape. They're very good at running the football. I think one of the things that showcased Matt LaFleur as a head coach is what the Packers have done offensively with Josh Jacobs this year in the replacing Aaron Jones, which was not a popular move when it happened. But there's more durability and physical nature to what Josh Jacobs does. So I think this year, what we've seen from Matt LaFleur is his showcased offense, which is built around the ground game. Green Bay doesn't have a number 1 receiver, but they obviously have one of the better running backs in the NFL in Josh Jacobs. And what LaFleur did in changing out his defensive coordinator to Jeff Hapley this year is he's essentially said, Hapley's got the defense, and I am going to run my offense, which is predicated on the ground game and featuring Josh Jacobs, and then having, that group of receivers through Jordan Love kind of take over from there. I think it's a really good offense. They've missed Christian Watson when he hasn't been available. They don't have a true number 1 game breaker, but I think the offense has been very good as a whole.
So I guess my follow up to that, so he's the offensive mind connected with the quarterbacks. So here in Chicago, we're dealing with this cliche of, is he a leader of men? Like, can the Bears find a leader of men? Is LaFleur a leader of men, or did he kind of grow into that with time in terms of his command, presence, all of that in front of the entire team?
Yeah, I think I would argue that he's grown into it, but he really had, baptism by fire with Aaron Rodgers, because Rodgers really kind of controlled much of the narrative, made it difficult, I think, on Mike McCarthy late, and then on Matt LaFleur early. And Matt LaFleur held his ground. A year ago, LaFleur suspends Jair Alexander for going out to do the coin toss in Carolina when he wasn't authorized to go out and do the coin toss. he stood his ground on that. He did the same thing earlier this year to Romeo Dobbs, the wide receiver, suspended him for a game after he chose to skip a practice in a game week and was not happy with his role. And then Romeo Dobbs has been a productive member of the Packers society since. So I think he's shown the toughness to be a leader of men in that locker room, that he has handled his business on both of those scenarios, which can be volatile, right? If you suspend one of your leading players last year and this, it could cause problems. And I don't think it has. So I like Matt LaFleur in that regard. He's also, and this would go back, Adam, to the previous question, he's also essentially delegated. You know, he lets special teams do special teams, and he lets Jeff Hapley, his defensive coordinator, handle that. And he's got the offense. And I think the combination of that has been really good. I think Sunday will be either his 99th or 100th game as a head coach, and his winning percentage being in the mid to high 60s is really dang good. You know, he's going to win. If they do win on Sunday, it'd be 12 wins. That's a heck of a season. And people are going to focus on the 5 losses and then what he does in the postseason, because he hasn't gotten home yet. Been in the championship round, been in the divisional round. He hasn't gotten all the way home. And that is the hole in Matt LaFleur's resume in Green Bay, is that he hasn't gotten them there.
Mike, you know, in terms of this matchup this week, the only path to a Bears victory I can figure out involves scoreboard watching. I know LaFleur said this week that, well, his answer I thought was interesting. Like, they're going to play the starters, but he referenced a few years ago when they tried something else. And then but his answer was basically like, the only right thing to do is whatever the good thing ends up being. That wasn't an exact quote, but it was along those lines of like, I guess his point was like, you can do it either way, and the only thing that matters is that you end up winning the game next week. Really, whoever you're playing in the playoffs, and you're going to get criticized if you don't do it the right way. I get that, but I guess my question is, based on what he said this week, how do you think that's going to be handled? Is there any world in which they look up at the scoreboard at halftime and Washington's killing the Cowboys? Would he sit guys in the second half?
I don't think so, unless Green Bay had a commanding lead. You know, Green Bay takes advantage and pushes up on the scoreboard early third quarter and has a 3-score lead. Then I think he'd take and go to Malik Willis and some of his reserves. But I don't think they'll do it based on the Commanders game in Dallas. I don't believe that they'll look at that scoreboard, and if Washington is up by 3 scores, that they would pull starters. I think this team, because of their loss at Minnesota, I think this Packers team needs an injection of swagger, of confidence. So I do think that he's going to go frontline players, and there's a desire, a want to feel good about whatever it is, wherever it is they're going, which is in all likelihood Philadelphia. But if they're going to Philadelphia, I think he wants his team to be invigorated by finishing in a way that they're carrying some confidence into the second weekend of January.
Mike, going off that, and since they are playing for seeding, what is the conversation about, just in terms of which matchups or which matchup in the first round is most favorable?
Well, obviously, it would be Tampa Bay or Los Angeles. To go on the road would be better in either of those than to go to Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a bit of a mystery because of Jalen Hurts. Green Bay played Philadelphia, but it's the first game of the season. Everything is different. I mean, I don't think any of that applies going forward. But Saquon Barkley and a healthy Jalen Hurts and their receivers creates an issue. So, yeah, being the 6th seed is a much better scenario for Green Bay. I brought up on my show throughout the week, if Green Bay is indeed the 7, they're going to go to Philadelphia. And if they were able to win, they're going to get the 1 seed. And then the question here was, where would you rather go? To Detroit, who has been so banged up, or to Minnesota, where you've trailed against Minnesota 27-10 in the most previous game? You trailed 28-0 to the Vikings at home. I think in both cases, Minnesota got a little complacent, and maybe there's a little false narrative that the Packers made both games 2-point games, because I thought Minnesota played with their food Monday night at US Bank, and I thought they just kind of got complacent with a 28-0 lead in Green Bay back earlier in the season. So I think that the road would go through Detroit. My listeners said they would prefer Detroit beats Minnesota. I think part of that is because we really don't like the Vikings. But part two is that I think with Detroit's injury situation and how bad their defense has been, there's a viable path to go through Detroit and win that game. Minnesota is so much better than advertised. Most people have slept on them all season long. When we played them last week, I think it's the first time I thought Minnesota is a true Super Bowl contender, and I think they are.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. I kind of jumped on the bandwagon about a month ago, and I agree with what you said about like how that game played out last week. In fact, I think I saw you tweet right before the Packers made it close again that like, and I agreed with your tweet, which was essentially like the Packers are a good team. They're not a great team. And then all of a sudden they went on a little run there and made it a lot closer.
Well, they're down 27-10, and I tweeted about it being a white flag moment, and this is a beatdown, and then I get a bunch of people coming back at me. They lost by 2. Why is it a beatdown? Well, because they were down 27-10. That game was over, and Minnesota kind of stopped playing.
Yeah, 100%. Mike, always appreciate the insight. Thank you so much for joining us. And are you going to be there on Sunday? Or on Sunday?
I'll be there on Sunday. In the warm library of a press box to watch the game, which is, I suppose, better than it looks like maybe middle teens for high temperature, 17, 18 degrees. So it'll be a cold one, and I do think there are going to be some fans dressed as empty seats on Sunday, which doesn't happen very often at Lambeau.
Wow. Yeah, especially against the Bears, but the Bears fans aren't buying the tickets. I can tell you that.
Well, they'll be all bundled up, so they'll stretch out, and you won't see the empty seats anyway. But I don't think it'll be shoulder to shoulder and snug as it could be.
Well, Mike, we'll see you in that warm press box.
All right, sounds great, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks to Mike for jumping on the show. I'm going to give you a little hidden gem. Okay, that people need to know about. If you're ever driving through the Madison, Wisconsin area, pull off the highway in Waunakee, just north of Madison, drive into town, the main street, it's Highway 19. It's a place called the Red and White Wine Bar that Mike and his wife own. And it's outstanding. It's one of those places where they give you a card and then you can sample a bunch of different pours. And they also have, if you're not a wine person, the wine's outstanding. But if you're not a wine person, they also have a lot of bourbon there, which is more my alley.
Your taste.
Yeah. And they also got some good appetizers that you can order and stuff like that. It's not like a full menu, but you can,
cheese curds. Yeah, I got it.
Get some food as well. It's one of our favorite places to stop. And you can support our guests at the same time.
Red and White Wine Bar. I like the name.
Yeah.
Red and white because of, the flavors of wine, but red and white also because of the Badgers colors.
That's right. Look at you. See, it took me longer to actually make the wine connection with that. I was just like, oh, yeah, red and white, Badgers.
I made it instantly.
Yeah. Oh, that's because you're a wine guy. Yeah,
I
Waunakee,
guess.
Wisconsin, not far off the highway. If you're ever driving through Madison, go check it out. All right. Should we get to over-unders?
Over-unders. From Ashwin. Over-unders. Cole Kmet targets. Half.
Probably not.
It is one of the most mystifying things this season.
Yeah. I don't get it. In part because, like, he and Caleb, there's no issue there either. It's not like it's like, in fact, it's the opposite. So you would think, like, even if he's not getting schemed up, that he's have to block a lot, you'd think, like, the quarterback would find him. I was watching Hard Knocks last night, and Joe Burrow, granted, it's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, right? But he's mic'd up in practice and he's telling one of his teammates, he's like, yeah, when Jamar just gets in that mode where he's just going off, I don't care what I'm looking at. I just keep throwing him the ball. I don't care what the read says. I don't care what the coverage is. I just keep throwing it to him. Like, you can force things every once in a while if you want to get a guy a ball.
Well, you could argue they already are.
Yeah.
Look at Keenan Allen's increase in targets. Cole Kmet's targets the past 5 games. Let's go in reverse order. 3, 0, 1, 2, 0. I'm going to say he's over with 1 or 2 targets this game.
Yeah, I think they'll at least. I'm with you. I'll take the over.
From Sofa King, sacks taken by Caleb Williams, 4.5.
Over.
It just seems like it's going to happen after his very adamant defense of his offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
My history covering the Chicago Bears tells me when you have strong messages like that, sometimes, I don't know why, but the opposite of what you intend to happen happens. And I think the Packers are going to be all over Caleb Williams, and I think some of those sacks are going to be on him too.
Yeah, and I also think that the part of this that is Caleb's fault, the sacks he has taken, by the way, he did a great job of. That's a really well professionally handled the way he took the heat off his whole line there. That was really well done. You should feel good about that in the future. But the reality is he's also right that a lot of these sacks have been on him. And I don't see how that changes this week. I think that's going to take a new offense, a new coaching staff, new ideas, finding the right connection, finding the right system that he's comfortable in with his footwork and his timing and all that. Because it's obvious that right now he's not comfortable. And so he's going to take at least 2 on his own, and you throw in 3 more from the offensive line, and that's 5. So I'll take the over.
Yeah, 5 sounds good. Next one. From Brock, over under team loafs. Pretend Flus is still around to call them. 7.5. I like this one because it's about business decisions. It's about guys who have checked out. It's the last game of the year. Like Mike said, it's going to be very cold.
Very cold.
Maybe I'll do this. I'll try to find as many loafs as I can. It's going to be. They're going to be there. I'm going to say under, but it's like I'm talking about like the most obvious loafs, where you don't have to see them on film later. I'm going to say under, but it flirts with the over.
The last time the Bears played, I think the Bears have only played one other afternoon game in Green Bay the entire time we've been covering this team. It's always a night game. I want to say it was 2019.
A long time ago.
I remember it was like maybe 2 weeks left in the season, and it was very cold. It was very similar type of day where I think it's going to be sunny and cold. And I remember running into Akeem Hicks a couple days after the game, and she's like, how cold was it? He was like, dude, brutal. Like, absolutely brutal. So then you add, and at that point, if that was 2019, they were still playing for, well, I don't know if they were playing for something, but they weren't this bad. I don't know if they were this checked out.
Not in 2019. I think they won 8-8.
Yeah, but were they still playing for something the last week of the season? I forget.
We'd have to look back. I don't know if it was. I thought maybe
because 2020 is the year they backed into the playoffs.
Yeah,
as the 7th seed. But I feel like that game in Green Bay was meaningless that year, but I might just be making up. The point is, it's cold. It's late in the year. They've won 4 games. Loafs aplenty.
Yes. Oh, okay. So maybe it's just hard to see a lot of them live because loafs, by the Flus definition, is if the defensive lineman isn't chasing the play.
Well, that's the key in this. Is it's the Flus. I think the loafs have decreased since Flus left.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know.
There'll be a lot of loafing. All right,
maybe
next one.
Rod Marinelli's calling into Hal's Hall every week to grade out the loafs.
Yeah. I wonder if they've probably kept them going. All right, from Black Dog. Cuts to McCaskey and their polls during the broadcast. 4.5. So if I remember correctly, Poles' seat is like right behind me in the press box. So maybe I'll stand up and have a cameo.
So cuts to Adam Jahns.
Adam
during the
Jahns.
broadcast. 0.5.
Yeah, 0.5.
McCaskey.
George McCaskey can't hide in Lambeau Field. They will know where he is in a nice warm booth somewhere with his family.
I'm going to take the under. There might be a couple McCaskey. I think it'd be harder to get polls.
No, Poles will be in the press box. That'll be easy. He'll be easy to find.
Okay. So you're going over?
I'm going to go over. You'll get like the ones towards the end of the game where they're like going in and out from play to talking about.
If you throw Kevin Warren in there, I'll take the over. Get the
Fair enough.
trifecta.
Okay.
Get the trifecta.
The brass. Last one from Chicago Bears uniform tractor. How many days till the Bears announce their next head coach? Over, under, 28.5.
This is really good. So this basically means like February 1st. Do they announce?
Now, history tells me to take the under because the Bears have typically acted very fast. I know it doesn't seem like the whole process is fast, but the whole Poles Eberflus thing came together in a matter of days after all their searches. It's usually like a 2-week window where the Bears make their decisions after they interview somebody every day. I guess it depends if they want Ben Johnson, really, or Brian Flores, or Aaron Glenn, someone on a playoff team who's making a deep run.
I'm going to take the under on this, and it's related to a prediction I'm making here in a few minutes. So I'll explain further in a second. I think it's a really good number, though.
I like it. History tells me to take the under, though.
Okay. All right, let's dive in. We got Fox, noon, Bears at Packers. Packers, a 10-point favorite.
Bold predictions.
My bold prediction, Johnsy, is the Bears do not score an offensive touchdown.
Oh, man. Okay.
They're going to have one touchdown in this game, but it's not going to come from the offense. That's what I got.
Oh, I don't want to cover that.
Sorry, I just ruined your weekend.
You're going to be there too.
Yeah, but I don't care. I'm there. I like going at Lambeau. I can enjoy the experience regardless of the game.
This is my prediction, the one I gave to Kevin Fishbane for his mailbag article that comes out every Friday. Please check that out on theathletic.com. Packers 27, Bears 23. The Packers are playing for postseason seeding. The Bears are playing for pride. I'll add this, whatever's left of it, just in terms of how the season is played out. My bold prediction, the one Cole Kmet target catch is a touchdown catch. There it is.
Lock it up. You better lock it up. No, you lock it
there
up.
It
lock
is.
It up. Lock it up. Lock it up.
Might as well end the season with a classic.
Yes, why not? It's going to be a weird game for the Packers too. Maybe some scoreboard watching. The cold will be a factor, but I don't know. I want to see something. I don't want to see what you're presenting, but I want to see something.
Well, apologies to the Kmet family because I'm pretty sure every time you've predicted a Kmet touchdown, it doesn't happen.
I'm trying to get the reverse karma going here for him because I don't know why he's not being targeted. It's baffling.
Yeah. All right. 2 other games we are going to get to. We're not going to pick the full slate. We'll stick with Saturday night, ESPN. Oh, we didn't pick the Bears game. Or I didn't give my pick. That's the problem. I knew I was forgetting something.
You picked them basically not the scores.
I know.
I think
you get the point. No, here's my actual score prediction though, and I don't think I've ever done this in the history of this podcast. I am picking right on the line. I got the Packers winning 20-10, a push on the spread. So they get a touchdown, but it's not offensive. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a good one. All right, well, let's go Saturday night, ESPN, 7 p.m. The Bengals are in Pittsburgh, and the Bengals are actually a 2.5-point favorite in this one. Bengals have to win to keep their hopes alive. They need some very unlikely help in 2 games to come their way on Sunday to get into the playoffs. But they won't know that till Sunday, so they got to go all out Saturday night. And the Steelers still alive in the AFC North, although the Ravens could take care of that earlier in the day, which makes this kind of an interesting situation with how the Steelers can handle this one.
So if the Ravens win, the Steelers are in. Correct?
Steelers are in,
They're in.
but the Ravens would get the I believe the Steelers would be locked up
For their seeding.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Give me a
taking
second here. I wrote all the stuff down Monday.
All right.
Pittsburgh, they win the AFC North with a win and a Baltimore loss. So if the Baltimore wins that earlier game, they cannot win the AFC North. If they win, okay, so here's what's still on the line. They could still either be the 5 seed or the 6 seed. If they don't win the AFC North,
So they got something to play for a little bit.
I think seeding, which would matter. Would you rather be the 5 seed going to Houston or the 6 seed going to Baltimore?
I'll go to Houston.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
good
that
game Saturday night. I'm actually going to take the Bengals to win and cover. I don't like the way the Steelers have been trending. I think they've lost a couple games in a row, right? 3 in a row, more than that, 3.
Yeah.
The Bengals have an MVP candidate in Joe Burrow. This is like a full circle prediction for us too, because we saw the Bengals live in action at joint practices during training camp, and we had the feeling at that time like the Bengals didn't look like a good team, Bears looked like the better team, and look how things turned out. When you have a superstar quarterback like Joe Burrow putting up the numbers like he is, good things tend to happen. So give me the Bengals in this one.
Yeah, three losses in a row. It's been a tough schedule though for the Steelers. They played the Eagles, Ravens, and Chiefs back-to-back weeks. Bengals have won 4 in a row. I do agree with you here though. I like how the Bengals are playing. They can end the season on a 4-game win streak. And here's what I specifically don't like. I don't like how Russell Wilson's been playing lately. It's like he's gone back to Denver, Russ. I wonder if we'll see a little bit more of Justin Fields in this game too. Especially if it's really only seeding on the line and Baltimore loses earlier in the day. Be a little tempted to just give Russell a little bit of a rest and let Justin do his thing a little bit more. It's just an interesting wrinkle you might see on Saturday night. That's based off nothing but me guessing a little bit. But I don't know.
That's what we do here, baby.
Yeah. All right. NBC, 7:20 p.m. The question is, how quickly can we get home from Lambeau Field to watch as much of this game as possible? Vikings at Lions. The Lions are a 3-point favorite. This is an awesome game to end the year for so many reasons. The most obvious of which is what's on the line and the consequences of losing. First round bye, 1 seed if you win. You lose, you got back-to-back road games coming up. Well, you're playing on the road essentially the rest of the way. Okay, might not be in the world having to go to Tampa next week necessarily, but then you go to Philly instead of hosting games after having a bye. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, especially I would say even more so for the Lions. And on top of that, Johns, this is the most wins the 2 teams have ever had in any game played in the NFL in the history of the league. It's awesome. Who you got?
I got myself getting home at halftime.
That's my goal too.
Comfortably on my couch. Not just like running in, but like good to go. There you go. That's my pick. Sorry. Anyway, I got the Vikings. I just think these injuries. I just feel bad for Detroit in a sense because they've had such a great year and they have the offense to overcome their injury situation. I just don't know if they could do it in this situation with in a game of this magnitude against the way the Vikings are playing right now. So give me the Vikings to win outright and to cover.
I agree with you. I made this decision on Monday night watching the Lions against the 49ers. And it was despite the fact that I never was really worried during that game. I still like, the Lions are going to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think they have that it factor that they can. If the Lions do win this game, it'll tell me a lot about them. And I think that they've shown glimpses of this, that they don't really care what the circumstances are. They're going to play their style of football, and they're going to play 4 quarters of it, and they're going to wear teams down, and they're going to ultimately come on top late. That's a really good sign for them. But then I look at these defenses right now, and they're just trending in the opposite direction. I mean, this Lions team, I have more faith that the Vikings are still going to be able to move the ball and put up points against where this Lions defense is right now than the other way around with what Brian Flores is doing on that side for the Vikings. I don't feel incredibly confident about this pick, though, because it makes me nervous how the Vikings have let teams back into games, including the Packers last week. You can't do that against the Lions. Jared Goff will pick you apart in the fourth quarter. So, and this is in Detroit. I don't feel very confident about it. This is part of the reason why I think this game is going to be awesome. But I am going to take the Vikings. There's something about this Vikings team. They're the same way, though. They find ways to win. They're incredibly well coached, and they're healthier.
Sometimes these games come down to like who gets that field goal stop more, like who gets more field goal stops than allowing the touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Vikings get more of those in this one. I mean, they may even stop the Lions on a couple 4th downs that Dan Campbell loves to gamble on, just because they're healthier. Brian Flores is a head coach candidate for many reasons, and Aaron Glenn's defense is just. I know they're getting Alex Anzalone back. He's got a steel plate in his arm. That's cool. That's going to hurt somebody. But they're banged up. It's going to catch up to him. You would think it would catch up to him.
He's Iron Man out there.
He's Iron Man out there.
Watch the kickers in this game. Vikings kicker, shaky last week. Jake Bates on the Lions. He was the one that Troy Aikman was just blatantly laughing at during the game Monday night because he was like laying on the ground with a softball, working on his hip or whatever.
Yeah, that became a meme. Looked like George Costanza on the couch.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if this game comes down to the kickers and who you just said with the field goals. Yeah, who holds them to the field goals? Who makes the field goals though?
Yeah.
So it's gonna be fun. I can't wait. Let's make it a quick locker room at Lambeau. And I made this plea the other day on CSGO. I'd like to put it out there again to all the 7,000 police officers that tend to patrol I-94 between Milwaukee and the border. Just watch football Sunday. You don't need to be out there. Is it not the most patrolled stretch of highway in America? It's unbelievable.
Yeah. You got to get the, what do they call us? All the fibs coming in to Illinois.
Yeah.
Wisconsin.
Well, we get it.
Yeah, I get it.
Do you have Sirius XM?
I don't. No.
Oh, because here's the play. If we're not getting home till halftime, listen to Paul Allen, the voice of the Vikings in the first half. It's such a good broadcast. He'll be losing his mind. It'll be very entertaining. That's what's going to get me home. So
maybe make you go faster if it's a good game, though.
Maybe. All right. Good episode. Appreciate everybody being here. We'll be back Monday.
I think so.
Yeah, we'll be back Monday. Yeah. We'll see how locker room clean out. We don't know the schedule for Monday
It's
yet.
usually
so we
around
might
noon, 11 or noon.
have to be a little flexible. Yeah. So try to enjoy the game Sunday. Watch other football if you if you must. But we'll be here Monday to break it all down for you. Talk to you then.
See ya.